her citizens. He said the crackdown on peaceful protesters and journalists covering the memorial protest on Wednesday at Lekki Tollgate in Lagos, where soldiers had opened fire on peaceful demonstrators exactly 1 year ago, showed Nigeria had yet to learn any lesson. Quote, "It's regrettable that on the occasion of the anniversary of such a symbolic moment in our nation's history, we do not appear to have learned our lessons as symbolized by the arrest and detention of peaceful protesters exercising their fundamental human rights and journalists going about their lawful duties at the Lekki Toll Plaza this morning," the NBA president said in a statement. So the NBA is convinced a year afterwards, especially with the happenings yesterday at the Lekki Tollgate, where we had demonstrators and the conduct of police officers. The NBA is convinced that Nigeria as a nation, as a people, we are not learned anything from last year's #EndSARS protest. But have we really? Have we made any progress? Have we made any advancement at all? These are not really the matters we're discussing right now. And since this is the position of the Nigeria Bar Association, thought it might make for a good conversation if we had lawyers as well to discuss this matter. And I've got two lawyers joining me for this conversation. First, I've got Barrister Ritchard Wokocha. He joins via phone. Former Chairman, Nigeria Bar Association, Amak Branch, Associate Professor of Public Law at Rivers State University. Barrister Wokocha, good evening to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dario. Good evening, Nigerians.
And also live right here in the studio, we've got Barrister Festus Oguche as well. Barrister Oguche, good evening to you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Barrister Oguche, I'll start with you straight away. I'll ask you, in your estimation, what was responsible for the #EndSARS protest that we experienced last year, and could it have been prevented? Was it avoidable?
What was responsible for it was continuous abuse of public powers by the police and the commission of criminal crimes by men in uniform who were supposed to be officers protecting citizens and preserving the law and preserving the peace. The continuous violation of that led to the call for citizens to rise and say that enough was enough. Was it avoidable? Definitely, absolutely. It's not a common thing in all nations. Occasionally, you see Black Lives Matter, which reflects a similar thing with respect to a particular sector, treatment of blacks in crime investigation in the United States. But apart from that, it's not a regular thing for the police department as a whole to develop an attitude and a character that has become cultural with it of abusing the law instead of preserving the law. So it should have been avoidable if we have mechanisms for controlling these excesses and dealing with those who are using the office to commit crimes against the state and against the people of the state. So it's avoidable, but we did nothing about avoiding it, and that's why it happened.
So, Barrister, go over to you now. Now, this incident happened. Unfortunately, it did. Or fortunately, depends on your perspective, I suppose. But at the time of the protest, with all that transpired at that time, do you think that the government of today understood the feelings, the positions, the yearnings, the aspirations, the shoutings of Nigerians at that time of the EndSARS protest? Do you think they got the message, they understood what it was about?
Of course, they will understand it to the extent that it will help them in the efforts to quell the disturbances so they can go on with business as usual. I don't really think that it went down into the roots of their memory to understand that there's more to the protest than the ordinary eyes. I believe that what has happened since after then, particularly the denials of government about the deaths and killings and the involvement of the military, points to a particular direction that the federal government is here to have a thorough grasp of what it is all about. And maybe it is not even interested. Because if you look at it objectively, you discover also that there hasn't been any shift whatsoever since EndSARS protests. You'll envisage that that kind of protest, going by its dimension and the fact that it touched on the fundamental aspects of our existence, should have been able to get people in authority, people in power to rise up to the occasion and do the things that are demanding of them by virtue of their positions, particularly as it relates to the young members of the society who are the most active members of the society in terms of employment, in terms of assuaging poverty to the extent that it can be done, in terms of entrenching good governance, in terms of abating the incidence of violence, the incidence of terrorism that has overtaken the land.
Barrister Wokocha, back to you. Now, why, in your estimation, do you suppose that we have continually and consistently had in existence the kind of police force and the kind of policing that we've had in this country? Because for so many years, I mean, the agitations of the end-time protesters, which is a lot of, if not most Nigerians, or even all, at least at heart, is not something that's happened or started last year. It's been on the hashtag EndSARS itself had existed for some years prior to the protest, and the feelings of those who supported the protest, that feeling had existed for years on end as well. Why do you suppose that successive governments had failed, had not been able to do something about the police or reform the police or address the concerns that Nigerians have expressed for many years about the police?
I think with the government and the security institutions, it is rather cultural. At the same of being historical. All of this happens because our government and our security organization are strangers to us. They are more like government and police of occupation or army of occupation than a people's army. A people's army is trained with the consciousness that I am ready to lay down my life to save my people, to preserve the peace among my people, to ensure that nothing happens to our people. They have a stake in the people they are talking about. And the preservation of those people is their cardinal responsibility, for which they are ready to lay down their lives. And in most states where you have a people's army, the people are also ready to lay down their lives to protect their officers. So we have transited from a colonial state to quote and unquote independent state in which our security apparatus did not transit. The police you have is not different from the colonial police that was employed to deal with the barbarians, to help the colonialists deal with the barbarians and plug us into line. That is why you still have the concept of bloody civilians. There is a complete severance. A severance you don't find in civilized countries. So somehow we have failed to transit from the colonial government into a people's government. We have failed to grow from a colonial police and colonial army into a people's police or people's army. And so we continue to exist to maintain a we and them relationship. For that, we are able to be plugged into line. And whatever crimes they commit is to be denied. And the authorities will pack them and say that their investigation shows that there was no wrongdoing on the part of the officer. This has been consistent, and it is that culture of colonial occupation that has preserved that culture. And that culture is what has fueled the continuous abuse of people's rights in the country. For that, we are not citizens in the true sense of citizens. We are bloody civilians to be dealt with. And for them as institutions and as governments, they maintain the same position and they protect and defend their own for doing their instruction and their duty.
Barrister Oguche,
I think that's how we got here.
Barrister Oguche, do you agree with him? And beyond that, is it deliberate? Now, he described how that in the colonial times, it was the colonial leadership using the armed forces for that purpose. Would you say that, do you agree with him first and foremost? And if you do agree, would you say that the colonial masters have been replaced by the current leadership that we have, and it's the same relationship that's playing out right now? And added to that, I had a conversation with a police officer recently, and he was of the position that the police right now in Nigeria is exactly what the government of the day wants it to be. Do you agree with that position?
Well, first of all, I agree completely with my learned friend, the other side. And the thing is that the tradition that the police acquired was one of a constabulary force, which was established maybe to quell protests, to quell pro-independent independence agitators of those days, the Nnamdi Azikiwes and the rest of them, and also to see how they can keep I think Wokocha used the word barbarians, the savages, those of them that are totally uncivilized, to keep them at bay and keep them away from their abodes. And that culture became translated to what we have now. There hasn't been much reorientation, so to speak, in terms of the attitude, the disposition, and the inclination of the police force, so that you begin to see them have the same proclivity as they used to in the days of in the days prior to independence, and that's a true fact. And since then, the successive governments that have been coming on, have not done anything to change it because maybe it suits them. That also agrees with the theory of your friend who says that the government of the day got the police it wanted or it deserves. It will not change anything. There has been a lot of improvements and growth to the policing structure globally. And these improvements, these conventions, they are containing conventions and international treaties on policing, and which aspect we think should have been the first port of call for the Nigerian police force or for the federal government to do immediately at the post-NSAS protests in terms of reforming the police to meet the standards of the globe as it is today. Those standards are well set out in areas of arrest, areas of detention, areas of the nature of arms to carry, areas of your interaction with the community. They are all there. But incidentally, they went and formed a SWAT, and since then, SWAT has not been any different from SARS. And the brutalities are still going on here and there. And we begin to find out that at the end of the day, it's going to be the same thing all over.
1 year after, I still would say Barrister Oguche, 1 year after, and especially with the happenings yesterday at the Lekki toll gate and possibly other parts of Lagos and even outside Lagos as well, within the country, have we as a nation, did we learn anything at all, no matter how minuscule or minute, did we learn anything from the NSAS protest of last year?
Well, first of all, I learned something, and that's to the effect that Nigerians, they have the power of solidarity as well. They can exercise it, which, of course, it did through NSAS protests. It came as a very big surprise to the political elites, the military elites themselves, because, they sort of underrated the capacity of Nigerians to come together, as one, to say no to something. And at the end, for the leadership, I doubt if they learned anything. I think simply they've succeeded in quelling the protests as much as they could, either directly or indirectly, and maybe for some time they won't have that kind of disturbance again, and they're back to their seats in political office and elective positions, and that's it. So they have not, I wouldn't say they have learned any lesson, because there hasn't been any improvement in police rules and mechanism, in the idea of what the police should be and how it should function, and a whole lot of things. We expected maybe some very radical changes, radical shifts, radical reforms in the police force, sufficient to convince anybody that at least government had made a response. But since then, what response have you had, except for the creation of SWAT? There hasn't been any response at all, from the authorities. And that tells me that they are not very, very interested in what's going on, and have not learned any lesson as well.
Barrister Oguche, same question as well. 1 year after, has the Nigerian state learned anything from the NSAS protest of last year?
I think for the Nigerian state, they learned nothing. Honestly, I doubt that they have the capacity to learn. Something more critical than NSAS needs to happen to give them that capacity. For them, it was just a question of ending the disturbances and getting it out of the way, and they did. Yeah. Thereafter, everything that happened was a reaction. Setting up an inquiry was a reaction. The sitting, and you can see that they have not really implemented the outcome of those inquiries. Nobody has been arrested, nobody has been punished, nobody has been dismissed from service, nobody has been tried for the crimes that we are glaringly shown and proved at the hearings, some of which were admitted. You recall there were denials about shooting, and then there was admission of shooting into the air, and subsequently admission of shooting directly and all that. Nobody has been brought to book. The government is not even thinking about bringing anybody to book. And if there was sitting last year it's in the distant past for them, and it's not part of what they have budgeted for or projected to work on this year. It's completely gone. The land for nothing. And as I said, I believe that they are unable to learn anything until something more fundamental, something that threatens them directly much more happens. Until that happens, I'm afraid it is just the business as usual. Last year, before the protest, the army issued notice in the strategy that they will not tolerate the disturbance of the government, they will not stand by and watch, and they did what they had to do. This year, the police issued a similar notice, and you notice that they came out to implement the same thing. It clearly shows that the land massive, they did not say, okay, let's look at what the law says, let's see how we can do it in a refined manner that will correspond with the law to show that we are working with the law. Nothing. It did not matter that they were working against the law. It did not matter that they were repeating the same reason for which the protest was taking place in the first place. And they just had to move on. So we need to find a way, or we must find a way to hold our governments accountable, to enable them hold their voice in check. I think that's the right way to put it, because as the police officer you talked with said, it's absolutely correct that the police we have today is exactly what the government wants. A barking dog and an attack dog to hold the savages at bay.
This is hard facts in 913 Nigeria into here in Port Harcourt. 1 year after the end-times protest, have we learned anything as a nation? I guess the barrister Festus Oguche and barrister Ritchard Wokocha. Go for a break now. Return shortly. Conversation will continue. Please stay with us.
Information is a two-way thing. Nigeria Info, it's your turn. Let's talk.
And now, Hard Facts. Hard Facts with Dio.
Welcome back. Still Hard Fact 90.3 Nigeria Info. Her input Harcourt. I'm Dio. Conversation continues. Thanks for staying tuned. 26 minutes ago before 5 o'clock. Hashtag NSAS Memorial Protest. Nigeria has not learned any lesson. That's according to the Nigeria Bar Association. Two lawyers join me for this conversation. Barrister Festus Oguche is here in the studio. Barrister Ritchard Wokocha joins by phone. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the show once again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dario.
We'll start this time with Barrister Oguche in the studio. Before the break, I asked the question whether or not we've learned anything. You said we've learned nothing. Barrister Wokocha says the current leadership is incapable of learning anything, except
That's very right. Very correct.
Except something more drastic were to happen that would affect them directly.
Yes.
Now, what's the danger, or is there any danger of us not having learned anything from the
some lessons to wake up to certain responsibilities and obligations, and to understand that Nigerians that are leading, so to speak, are not very comfortable and happy with their ways, particularly with the issue of the police. But the care, function and all that, going, not just with the police, the military and all that, still going on now. It tells you that we have not learned a lesson, and that takes us very much close to the crucible of existence. I bet you that if we continue this way, it's not going to be very long before we cave in. We pray it doesn't go that way, but there definitely must be an end to this type of absurdities that's going on across the country. Very, very important, particularly on the issue of entrenching proper democratic reforms, obeying democratic norms, getting the security authorities, the law enforcement authorities to respect the fundamental rights of Nigerians. Getting the government of the day to understand that it has responsibilities for the welfare of Nigerians. And it's not just a culture of getting the money and looting and dragging here and there over who collects VAT and who does not collect VAT, but the responsibility of government to the people to ensure that proper governance is entrenched in the society. These are very important things.
Right, so Coach, I'd like your take on that as well. Do we face the threats of some dangers by not having learned anything from the hashtag NSAS protests?
Very obvious dangers, Dario. When you have in a system or in a state a police that is weak and unable to respond to calls when there is need for police to appear, when you have a system where citizens live at the mercy of criminals and there is nothing to look up to, and then you couple that with the fact that the police becomes an anti-people agency, that instead of being a people protector has become a danger to the people, it leads to only one obvious conclusion. The people will arm themselves and take care of their own security.
Exactly.
When that happens, that country is back to the state of nature. You only need to look around. You do not need to look far through history and look around in the environment to see ungoverned states, to see what happens when that happens. People will group themselves in order to secure themselves. There will be no need to obey the law, because those who should enforce the law, those whom you have assembled to enforce the law, are themselves breaking the law. So you see a policeman, rather than feel secure, you feel insecure, you feel in danger, and you look for the nearest thing with which you can defend yourself. We are gradually inching towards that state of nature. It is the greatest danger that can happen to any nation, because the outcome of it is usually disintegration, as we have experienced in countries where that has happened.
Right, so Coach, I still will see you. I think government inadequacies might appear somewhat obvious as far as the matter of policing in the country is concerned. But let's talk about the police officers themselves, who are the ones who perpetrate these heinous activities. And as much as the police top hierarchy would like us to believe that there are only a few bad eggs, or these atrocious incidents are just, very few and far between, I believe from the standpoint of Nigerians, that may not be the case. Maybe the majority of the police are that way. But they have an excuse. They have an immediate defense which they normally put up. oh, we buy our uniforms ourselves, oh, we buy buttons, so we fill the vans. How are we going to fill the vans if we don't do this? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to buy stationery? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? So maybe it appears there is some shortfall from government side as far as adequately funding and equipping the police. But can that explain? Can that even justify? I think is what I need to use here. The actions of these officers, you know, can they justify their actions?
Certainly not. The fact that you somehow, because of the state management system, you get to buy your uniform sometimes or at all times. You get to fuel your car and all that. But not stop the fact that you do those things to buy the uniform and fuel your car to carry out an obligation, which is implementation of the law. When you do those things, when you get those things and do what they are doing now, then you can't explain it with the fact that government has failed in this part. But again, why do you expect the average policeman to think differently? What is the instruction his superior gives him? What is the reaction of his superior each time he is shown to have violated the law? The superior answers his defense. And the camaraderie develops and they protect each other and defend each other. Steal stories out of the moon. You have had situations where dead Nigerians shoot themselves. But sometimes they didn't get up from the bed and shoot another person after they have died. They spin all kinds of stories to protect themselves and defend themselves when they have broken the law. So if the directive from us is not different, it's useless to dwell on why the man is doing what he's doing because he's carrying out directives. And to show you that he's carrying out directives, those from above do not hit when he is caught breaking the law. So nobody has any reason to break the law, including the law officers. None of them has any reason to break the law. But we must worry about the fact that our case has gone beyond the behavior of individual policemen. Because if each time policemen are caught in the act and they are dealt with timeously by the authorities, other policemen who value their job will not repeat the same thing. So what is sustaining it is the fact that there is a systemic effort at sustaining the abnormality that we have now. And because of that, I think we'll be wasting our time if we wonder why the individual policeman is not doing a sense. Because his training and his instruction is not to be a sense, it's to be destructive.
All right, Brother Festus, I'd like you to respond to the same question as well. Is there any justification? Yes, we buy buttons. Some would say we buy bullets. We fill our vehicles ourselves. Is that an excuse for these atrocious
The
acts?
anomalies we see in the police force, just like in every other institution of government, can be subsumed into the general notion of the weakness of the institutions. And the fact that they need to be strengthened becomes a very big imperative, without which you cannot see an institution that is functional. We are talking specifically about democratic institutions of governance, and which the police force happen to be at the apex. There's no justification whatsoever, but then you don't even look at it from that angle alone. You look at the recruitment process of the Nigerian police force, members of the force, and their trainings and all that. Has there been any departure from what it used to be in the 60s or 70s? What's the curricula of their training? What's the modus operandi of this thing that they got inducted in the course of their training and what have you? But I can tell you that there's no justification whatsoever for an average policeman to be purchasing his own clothes or his uniform or whatever apparel he adorns as a police officer. Is the responsibility of state. And when it gets to that level, of course, you see some negative responses from the men themselves, but it doesn't really mean that it should get lawless. I mean, there are better ways of getting this addressed. And we also had whole of history of embezzlements of police funds and embezzlements of a series of IGPs and all that, and tells us that something fun is happening with police funds, because at the end of the day, look at the budget of the police, and there's not much to be, in terms of the practical reality of the implementation of these budgets and how they are expended. There's nothing to write about. And I'm just looking forward to the day that the EFCC or ICPC will go looking into their accounts and seeing what actually is happening to the police funds, because they have quite some huge amount of money in the yearly budgets, and you don't seem to see anything that's connected with it that justifies the fact that the police force has, do I say, one of the poorest remunerations you can think of globally. I'm talking about the Nigeria police force, and it also goes to tell us a lot of things about these institutions, like I said, about the weaknesses of these institutions and how strengthened they should be to make them functional.
Well, whilst a lot of Nigerians, no doubt, suffer and grapple under the weight of the high-handedness of police officers in the country, are lawyers saved or protected from these atrocities?
Just this morning, you see how lawyers were harassed at the Federal High Court in Abuja, because somebody is standing trial there, even members of the media. And I think in a very regular country, the Inspector General of Police should be made to answer questions, because the media represent the public and trials are done in public. Why exclude them? Why not get them in at the trial? These are part of the things that we feel that the police force should be very well, thoroughly positioned to understand that, look, you cannot stop a journalist from coming to cover a judicial proceedings. No. Is acting to say that the proceeding is private, because not everybody will be there, for instance, and a whole lot of other circumstances, and bordering on brutality, on high-handedness, on use of arms. You don't ever see the average police officer on the road now these days carrying small arms. Little things you can put under your belt, but heavy arms that a visitor who comes here for the first time from Europe will think that the place is at war. And they are moved. I think they have this reflective disposition or proclivity that makes them think that their number one enemies are members of the public. And I say that with every equanimity.
Barrister, same question. Barrister Wokocha, same question to you. Are lawyers saved or protected from these atrocities of the police?
Probably not. You don't see it in the newspapers every day. You don't. But there are several cases where this is manifesting. Even when a lawyer goes to the police station in the course of his duty to inquire about his client and take brief or interview him to know exactly what his case is and all that, they face the same hostility, the same hostile attitude is extended to them. So I don't think anybody is protected from this. Nobody really. Even politicians who are in a different party from the party that is in charge in a particular place are facing the same problem. It does nobody any good. It's a system that enables those who are in control to do all they want to do using the instruments, public instruments of peacekeeping and coercion, to do all they want to do. And the victim is every other person. They themselves will become victims when another person occupies that same office. They will use the same instrument to achieve exactly the same thing. So nobody is exempted from it. Not even lawyers.
All right, Barrister Oguche, still with you. The Nigeria Bar Association is having its congress in Port Harcourt. I think 22nd of this month it's a Friday. Is when it's going to commence. No doubt, they're going to be a lot is going to be discussed, and all of that. Is there anything? And a lot of Nigerians look up to lawyers and the NBA, your umbrella association. Is there any role that the NBA can play with a view to helping to improve the system, to improve the situation that we have on our hands right now? As even you have admitted, the high-handedness of the police even hinder lawyers from performing their constitutionally given roles. So,
we realize that there is a lot we can do. We can engage the government, not in a non-hostile manner, but to get them to see that what they are doing is dangerous, and to get them to see where it's leading the nation. We can engage them in this time. We can also outrightly condemn what the government has done and call for the government to do the right thing. And if it becomes necessary, we go to court against activities of the government. For instance, how can we have the NBA and the president no law grants to you, an act that is completely the opposite of the constitutional position, and we do nothing. I expect the NBA to speak up on those occasions. At times, and if at times it's not take steps to stop the government. The people look up to the NBA, and if individually, if collectively we cannot protect the Constitution and seek to compel government to obey the Constitution, then how can people trust that we as individuals can protect them from the infection of their rights and from the madness that is going on around the country now?
Yes.
It will all lead to the anarchy that we want to avoid. So I expect that the NBA will sit down in this conference and deal with the realities that are on ground. There are issues, burning issues that are ongoing now, and come up with strong suggestions that will either compel government to listen or they prepare to take additional steps to get government to stop what they are doing wrong so that they don't lead the country into this situation.
All right, Barrister, I'll go over to you. Same question. Pardon me, I refer to it as a Congress. It's actually your annual general conference. Exactly. What do you expect of the NBA, your association, from this Congress vis-a-vis the matter we're discussing?
I think they've just started very well. They raised what you read earlier was coming from the Nigerian Bar Association, and which tells me that at least we have a bar association that's right on its direction in terms of tenacity. For some time now, the bar has not been very active in these areas, particularly of social advocacy as it used to be, particularly at the era that they removed the Chief Justice of the Federation, Honorable Justice Walter Onoge, where I expected some robust opposition from the Nigerian Bar Association, and they were all quiet. Some of us, went up in arms and started challenging the status quo as to why we should have an NBA, and these things are happening, and they're keeping quiet. So I think that the conference will provide a veritable opportunity for the Bar Association to speak from the perspective of law, from the perspective of social advocates, from the perspective of social engineers. Speak to power, speak to authority. That this thing is not right. These things are wrong. You ought to have learned some lessons from NSAS. They've stated that very clearly, in their news release today. But then, there are many more things that are wrong with the system that ought to have been put together. The Bar Association can do that. They have the force and the power, the dexterity to go to court and obtain injunctions against the government, no matter how indifferent government is to orders of court. It's immaterial. If lawyers come together and agree as one, rather than go in pursuit of election petitions and all that to make money, come and say, look, let us get this system correctly. Let's get it properly on ground. Because you see, the Constitution is very wise. It's a wise document. It's a document of wisdom. It bequeathed on the judicial system the power to check the excesses of the political elites. And if the judiciary has been playing that role very, very well, correctly, I don't think we'll have gotten to this stage. So part of the responsibility is judicial failure, but part of the responsibility is the failure of those of us at the bar. Because we don't go pursuing shadows in terms of looking for fat briefs and making money when your society is on fire. It doesn't give you any favor or any benefits at all. Living comfortably in the midst of war, in the midst of chaos.
Via WhatsApp, hello, lessons learned as per your question should be on all sides, government, the people, media, and international community. Peace cannot be mandated on any people. Rather, there needs to be a resolve by the people to embrace peace. In some quarters, we seem to conflate a demonstration with rioting. This includes the police as well, because they literally assume that every rally means a riot. For demonstrators, we also need to learn to know when it's tending towards being hijacked by hoodlums, leading to mass destruction. We all need to learn lessons. That's what Matt Paul via Facebook. Edem Aquera goes, my brother, nothing much has changed because the police are still active in their brutality, but I promise them that if it continues, we all will be consumed. We have to wrap it up on that note, gentlemen. Thanks for being a part of the conversation, especially my guest in the studio, Barrister Festus Oguche. Many, many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dayo. Thanks a lot.
And he's joined us via phone, Barrister Ritchard Wokocha. Barrister Wokocha, many thanks for your time as well.
Welcome, Dayo.
And wish you all lawyers a successful annual general conference.
Yes, thank you a lot.
Thank you, Dayo.
That's a wrap on the conversation for now. Got a commercial break coming up. The news update at 5. Discussions continue after that. Do please stay with us.